I'd like to call the February 10th, 2015 Lake Mills Public Works Board to order. Roll call, please.
First, I'd like to let you know that Mr. Temperley and Mr. Shar previously informed staff that they would not be here this evening. So, Mr. Fritsch,
Present.
Mr. Pickard,
Here.
Mr. Reich,
Here.
Mrs. Wolf.
Here.
Next on the agenda is corrections and/or approval of minutes of January 13th, 2015.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is item 4, questions and public comment. I don't think we have anybody here for that tonight, so we'll move on to item 5, presentations on water and electric advanced metering system.
All right, well, I'll get started here. We do have some guests. We've got some presentations that we'd like to have take up most of the evening. And just a couple of things before we get started. AMI stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. And right now, we are using kind of an AMR, which is an advanced or a remote read meter system. And so we're looking now to take the next step. And if you look through the memo that I sent, we've got 8 or 9 reasons that we want to take a good hard look at this. Without a doubt, the main reason is just to improve, update, and be more accurate with our meter reading. There's some other issues that we're looking at taking care of, but without a doubt, that's the biggest one that we're after. The AMI is probably the latest technology or the latest step in meter reading. Now, not a lot had changed with electric meters. It's kind of like lighting. Not a lot had changed for many, many years, and now we're in a real, I guess renaissance wouldn't be quite the right word, but we're in a real technologically advancing period where meter reading is getting more automated and more sophisticated, and at the same time more accurate and perhaps even a little bit easier to do. And again, as you look in the memo, it seems like we're at a pretty good time to start taking a look at this, and that's what we want to do this evening. You'll notice on the agenda, it's the presentation, so we're not asking tonight for any kind of a decision, but we probably have 3 goals in mind this evening. One is to just provide you an overview of what's available, what AMI is, what's available, to identify at least 2 of the products that are available. Now, the 2 vendors that are here with us this evening are here for a couple of reasons. One is that WPPI Energy, our power supplier, has vetted a number of vendors and kind of narrowed it down to these 2. And so they've got a lot of support in place, and you'll be hearing from Phil Hansen from WPPI in just a few minutes to get a little bit of insight into that. But the second reason is that these 2 represent 2 different ways of providing AMI. And I'm not 100% sure because I haven't investigated every other company that does that, but I would say in these 2, we're probably seeing the 2 different ways of the major players in the 2 different ways of doing this. And again, the third thing we want to accomplish is just to really begin a good discussion on this. This is a big deal for a number of reasons. One is it's not free, and so there's some dollars associated with it. And secondly, we're talking about our revenue stream. We're talking about the thing that measures how much energy people have to pay for, and that affects our cash flow and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very, very important discussion. And we don't want to rush into it. We want to take it slow, and we want to make sure everybody is clear on what's going on and that we're going in the right direction. So with that brief introduction, what we'd like to do tonight, if it's okay with you, Mark, is we'll have, first of all, Phil Hansen from WPPI do a brief presentation, and then we'll have Bill from Elster do a presentation, and finally Tim from Census finish up with the evening. And they've got some folks with them, so I'll let you introduce them as they come up. But we want to keep this, we want to keep it moving so that we get through the presentations and these folks get to tell you a little bit about what they've got for a product. But at the same time, we want to make sure you get your questions answered. So I think everybody's of the understanding that as you have questions, ask them. And that allows you to get the information that you need. So with that, excuse me, Phil, if I could turn it over to you, please.
Thank you.
Am I live here? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Phil Hansen with WPPI Energy. Wanted to give you a little intro on why WPPI is involved in this process. Well, WPPI is primarily your wholesale power provider. We also do a lot of services for members. Going back to about 2010, members are starting to look at advanced metering and wondering, is there any reason to coordinate together among the membership when they're moving forward with advanced metering? Put together a task force, looked into this, and they came to the conclusion that it does make sense to do some coordination. Two of the big reasons are the software is expensive to do this, and by pooling resources, members can save money on software, and also you need some technical staff not only to install the systems, but to keep these systems running. So we can have that technical staff at WPPI, and members can share the cost then of running their AMI system. Through that whole process, the task force looked at many vendors, and we settled on Elster and Census as our two partners. Reason we limited it to two is, one, to reduce the cost of the systems, the software, and also to make it manageable for the staff at WPPI to know two systems. We didn't want them to have to be experts in 6 systems, and we thought 2 was reasonable. One of the major costs in the software is integrating it with other pieces of the billing process. In addition to the Census and Elster software, there's a piece of software called Meter Data Management Software. We host that at WPPI, and that takes the data from those 2 AMI systems and stores it long-term, does checks on it. And one of the differences between AMR and AMI is, with your AMR, you're getting one read, probably one read a month, just like you did when your meter reader walked around, but you no longer have to walk that route. Advanced metering brings that to the next level. We're getting a read every 15 minutes for every customer. So instead of one read times the number of customers you have, we're getting 2,000 to 3,000 reads per month per customer. And in a lot of cases, we're doubling that because we're getting different type of information from that customer. We're getting not only watts received, watts delivered in case they have solar or some other generation. So it's a lot of data. We need that piece of software called the Meter Data Management System to manage that software. And then with that, we had to tie that to the billing system. So that was another cost, tying that to the Northstar billing system, which is the billing system you use. So your billing staff can enter things right in there, and the data flows right through to tell the Elster Census system what meters are installed, what customer has that meter. And ultimately, when it's billing time, it can send a signal to the Meter Data Management System saying, send me all the billing units for that customer. So it'll do the calcs and send you that information. That's meter reading. A goal of ours through this program is to get you value beyond the meter reading, though. Having all that data available, you can move into some new things. And having meters out in the field that have more capabilities, you can also do some new things like remote disconnects and remote reconnects. We have 12 members on this program right now. Some of them have already started the remote disconnect process from their office, so they no longer have to do truck rolls to disconnect those meters. They can do that right from the office. Someone comes in and pays, they can then reconnect that meter right away without sending someone out in the field. Another thing that's been really popular through the program is the water leak report. In the past, or today, if you don't have AMI, you typically know a customer has a leak when they get that high bill at the end of the month and they call and complain. With the water leak report, we're sending members a report every weekday. Tells them if any customer had continuous usage over the last 48 hours. So they can make that call then and let them know that they probably have a leak. They should look into it. And instead of being the bad guy that sent them that big bill, now you're the helpful utility that avoided that big bill for them. I was really amazed at the success in that report, some of the other communities. When we started that, there were multi-pages of people with leaks, and a lot of those utilities have cut that down to only a few customers that are on that report now on a weekly basis. So that's been a great success. Another report that we send out, now that we have all this information, is a distribution loss report. We can take what WPPI sells you and then compare it to what you're selling all your customers, and we come up with distribution losses. Losses are something you really can't measure. You have to do it by calculation like that. So with that loss report, we can do 2 things. We can watch changes on the system and tell you if improvements in your system are helping or hurting losses. And I think the bigger thing from that report is if there's a metering error, we can catch that right away. Something goes wrong with a meter at one of your large customers, we can usually catch that on that weekly report, see there's a problem, and try to track it down rather than finding out there's a billing error several months down the road. So those are some of the big things I see going beyond that meter read that you can get out of the service WPPI has. We're looking forward into the future. Right now, we're piloting a website called a portal where customers can log in and see their usage. So they could see up to yesterday's usage and see the hourly data on what they use. I think that's a great tool for energy efficiency, just making customers aware of how they use electricity. If that goes well this year, that's something we'll probably be rolling out to more members, making it available in 2016. So that's all I had on a summary of why WPPI is involved. If you have any questions, let me know, or through the presentations, if there's anything I can help on, just give me a shout.
Thanks, Phil. Does the board have any questions for Phil right now?
I guess one of my major concerns is that will these systems, I'm getting the feeling these systems would allow us to be a little bit more proactive as far as looking at the efficiencies of the system and so on, as you say, indicating water loss or electrical loss or stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the benefit of having that granular data. We can now compare it and look at trends and catch things a lot quicker. We've just started in some of the communities comparing daily water usage to daily pumpage to check on water loss that way.
It would not pinpoint where we're losing electricity or water, would it?
No, it doesn't pinpoint it, but through sub-metering, we can narrow it down to areas. If utilities go to that route and put some sub-metering in so you can see different feeder levels or water sections.
Very good. Anybody else? If not, thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. Before Bill starts, I just want to make it clear that we, of course, have been talking with Bill and Tim probably for almost a year, I would say. So what you're going to see tonight are presentations geared toward Lake Mills Light and Water, and when they get to the point where they start talking dollars and cents, they've looked at our system and they've got good information. Now, it's obviously not going to be 100% because we haven't really sat down and gone through everything with a fine-tooth comb. But I guess the point is that this is about what Lake Mills Light and Water can do with these systems. So, Bill, take it away.
Is this going to work all right? Great. It's easier for me to move around, and that way I can point and talk.
Okay.
I'm Bill Amelsey, and I work for Primus Marketing, as it says on the slide. Primus is the manufacturer's rep for Elster Metering. Also with me, being the assistant here, is Kenny Lineweber. Kenny works for Wesco, which is our distributor. Both of us are local. Actually, we both live on either ends of the bike trail from you here. I live in Cottage Grove, and Kenny's on the other end. He lives in Dousman. So we're both from nearby. Go ahead, Ken. Based on what we got from Paul, he had a specific outline of things he wanted us to cover, so that's what we have here. I'm going to go through who Elster is. A big part of what I'm going to talk about is how our system works. As Paul had said, what you're looking at tonight are kind of two different ways of doing the same thing, getting reader information. So I'll go through how our system works. Paul asked us also to talk about how AMI, advanced metering, compared to traditional metering, so I've got some information on that. And then he also asked us to do, if you were to move forward, what would be the step-by-step implementation, how would it work with your company? So that's what I'm going to go through, and I'm going to try to do all that in 20 minutes. So if you see Kenny's hand start to wave, it's because I'm at 15 minutes and I got 5 minutes to go. I asked him to keep an eye on the clock for me. And as Paul said, if anything comes up, you got questions, just sing out. All right. Elster. You probably hadn't heard of Elster before. I'm guessing you have heard of Westinghouse. Westinghouse has been around for a very, very long time. And the factory that Elster still uses down in Raleigh, North Carolina, it was built in 1953, and at that time it said Westinghouse on the outside of the building. 1990, it was bought by ABB. an international utility supplier, especially on the substation transmission end. ABB sold the metering part of their business to Elster in 2005. And Elster is a German company, and they were already doing gas and water metering in Europe, and decided, and they had plants here. The gas factory is in Nebraska, where they make gas meters, and the water meters down in Florida. They needed to get into electricity for those parts of the world where the country was buying gas, electric, and water, and wanted to buy all three of their meters from one company. So that's kind of where Elster comes from. Let's move on. So there's the factory. That building was built back in 1953, and it's where all the, we have manufacturing there, we have research there, and all the AMI stuff is there. We also have a factory down in Mexico now. It was opened up 2 years ago to try and stay price competitive. GE and Census are in nearby towns in Mexico also. So I want to leave that caveat. Some of our stuff is built in Mexico, along with the other guys. And roll. We sell meters to some of the biggest utilities in the country and across the world. Exelon is huge. Southern companies, Canadian Hydro. But more importantly, Kenny Flip. Here's what we're doing here in Wisconsin as part of WPPI. Whitehall, Waupun, Broadhead, Prairie du Sac, Sturgeon Bay, New Glarus, Evansville, I have italicized. They're signed a contract now and are going to be getting started later this year. And then underneath we have these utilities where they are just doing their biggest and largest customers first. Sturgeon Bay is listed there, but in both they started as large power only a year ago, last January, and it went so well they moved right into full deployment by summer. Stoughton Utilities, New Holstein, and you can read the rest. Those are all towns where we're doing the large power. So
And
we have an
are-
existing base.
So these are doing all AMI?
Yes. So the top ones are doing every meter, water and electric out there, a full deployment I call it. The lower ones have just their largest electric accounts. And there's a reason why it works with our system, which I'll get into. Sun Prairie is, I've got them italicized because they've been buying meters now for 3 years. At some point, they're going to go full deployment, but as they need meters, they're putting them out there. So we've got 3,000 some electric meters on their system already for when they're ready to go. And River Falls is going to do large power later this year. They've got them bought. The meters will get there in about a month. This is my credibility. Instead of me just saying we're a good supplier, APPA, the American Public Power Association, if you call them up and say, hey, if we're going to do AMI, who do you recommend? They're going to tell you Elster. And those are the reasons why they picked Elster. We work with the really large utilities. We also work with the very small utilities. We're not a bolt-on where we were a water company and, ooh, we're going to add electric, and we're not an electric and, ooh, we're going to add water. Elster has been doing both all along, and gas, if the utility happens to have it, which is just Florence here for WPPI. And the next one. And because of that, the standard warranty on meters is 1 year. Because of the WPPI, you get a second full year. So doubles the warranty. Now, how it works. Flip again. MDM, Phil mentioned. That's kind of the heart of the system, the meter data management. There is lots and lots of data coming through. And our meters, you're getting 4 different pieces of data every 15 minutes is coming through the system. You have to have a piece of software that's going to make sense of all that, and that's what WPPI bought. Not just buying the Elster software, they bought that. From there, it goes out and the WAN, the wide area network, it talks to the individual towns. Right now, WPPI has communication to your substations, and we basically tack onto that existing communication to bring it home so it doesn't cost you. And then from there, it bounces out and talks to the individual meters, which I'll get into next. Ken, there we go. What you're going to hear me talk about is a mesh. Our meters create a mesh. Each meter has a radio in it, and the information hops from meter to meter to meter to meter to a collection point, which we call a gatekeeper. Those I've been putting at the substations. So that's how we spread out and gather all the information. We can hop up to 16 times. It's a self-configuring. We don't have to tell it how to hop. It'll do that by itself. And I'll explain what self-optimizing and self-healing means in a minute. If you hear some of these strange terminology, I already said WAN. That's our wide area network. That's how we get the information from Lake Mills back to Sun Prairie. The local area network, the LAN, that's just how the meters talk to each other, water and electric. Okay, Ken? So a gatekeeper, which can be a meter. It's the meter in the center. I'll show you pictures of what we've been using for most of the WPPI members. It's a small box, but it can be a meter. And so when you put out the electric meters, each one of them immediately sends out a signal and says, hey, here I am. I need to find a way to get my information back to the office. And that's when it talks to the gatekeeper. Hit the button, Ken. Again. And as you add them, keep popping. There we go. So when we add more, then it's going to continue to talk. Hang on right there. So I'm going to use my little pointer. I think you can see it. So this meter may be able to talk to the gatekeeper, but it's going to say, I hear you, but you're not coming through that strong. So it basically waits there, and then maybe this one gets put in later. It's like, then it will hop. And that's the self-optimizing. It's measuring that radio strength, and once it finds it, it says, okay, I've got a good signal, and then it uses that path. Hit her again. And the water meters, a water meter piggybacks on. The electric meters have power there, and so they can use that energy, quarter of a watt for the radio, to send the information. There's no electricity hooked to the water meters. We have to use a battery to make it work. So in order to make that battery last 20 years, it sends the information to the nearest electric meter, and then it just rides along and gets back to the gatekeeper that way. And the way the system is set up is the meters send their information back to the gatekeeper every 4 hours. It's stored in the meter for about 2 weeks. So if something goes wrong with the gatekeeper, we didn't lose the data. It's still in the meter. But every 4 hours, it sends it to the gatekeeper. And then once every 24 hours, the gatekeeper sends all that data back to WPPI. And now it's stored in 3 different places: in Sun Prairie, in the gatekeeper, and in the meter. And that's where we talk about the redundancy. So if something goes wrong anywhere along the way, we're not losing your meter reads. We've still got them stored. Okay, Ken? Here's your system. Part of what Paul did was gave us a list of addresses for your electric and water locations, and then our guys lay out a plan so we know how many of these gatekeepers, 1, 2, 3, we need for your system. And then that's their best guess. And it is extremely inaccurate. And I'll show you why. Go ahead and flip. This is Pueblo, Colorado. I got another one where it's Belle Fourche in South Dakota. And this is where our engineers laid it out. These are all the gatekeepers. And this is what they projected on how the radios would move. Go ahead, Ken. This is reality. The red lines are one hop. If you've ever been to Pueblo, Colorado, it sits in a mountain valley, kind of, and it's mountains to the west. It's wide open spaces. And so our radios are hopping just amazing distances. What I'm trying to convey is what they project is extremely conservative. We'll be able to talk to the meters. Go ahead. Now I want to talk about, I talked about the self-optimizing. It finds its best source home. I'm going to get into the self-healing. So what if something goes wrong? So what I've got here are 2 gatekeepers, one here and one here, and these meters are talking to it. The water meters are connecting through and bringing the information. Hit it, Ken. So what happens if this guy right here is using a piece of fiber, optic cable, to communicate back to WPPI? Some guy digs into the fiber. The meter knows it lost communication, and what we're trying to convey here is it's sending out a signal saying, hey guys, I just lost communication. And then, Ken, it will basically drop off of that one, and now they're looking for a new way to get their information home. Ken, hit it again, and boom, it's going to jump to the other gatekeeper. Our gatekeepers, each one of those can talk to up to 2,048 electric meters and then another 2,000 water. When we lay out a system, I try to set them up at half of that, so that if something goes wrong, there's lots of room in this other gatekeeper nearby to collect all that data, so we can still get it back home to you. Ken? The other thing they do, so they've got a nice source back, it will automatically come up with a second way back, so that if let's say this guy doesn't pay his bill, and you disconnect him, actually pull the meter, now how's it going to get home? So when it goes out there, sets up a path home, and then sets up a secondary one so that if anything goes wrong, I can still get the meter reads there. Ken? When this one gets repaired, everything, because it's self-optimizing, goes back to the way it was. So that's how our system works. Self-healing, self-optimizing mesh. Go ahead. And these are what I call differentiators. What separates us from the other guys? As I said, right now, in the meters that we've been supplying to all those WPPI members, we're collecting 4 different channels, 4 sets of data from each household. How much energy it used every 15 minutes. If that household were to have wind or solar today or somewhere in the future, it's also going to collect how much energy went the other direction. It's already turned on to be bidirectional. And then we're also collecting the highest voltage and the lowest voltage during that 15-minute period. And even with all of that, we've got 2 months that it's going to store in that meter before it rolls over and loses any data. Self-heals, and it's flexible. So if today the best way to get the information home is fiber, let's say somewhere 10 years from now the best way is through the air, we don't care what it is, we can plug into that. In Waupun right now, they didn't have fiber at some of them. We were using a modem, a digital modem, but then you got to pay for that every month. They've now brought in fiber, so we're getting ready to convert them. So we're not locked into one communication source. We can adjust. Go ahead. Whitehall was the very first utility that we did with WPPI. And part of their contract with Elster said we had to prove that we would bring the data home or they weren't going to pay us. And so once we got some meters installed, 762 of them is when they ran the test. So the agreement said we had to run them for 7 days in a row. And we got 100% of all the data except for 2 days. On this day we were 3 short, and on this day we were 1. So we met the criteria, 99%. But you got to remember, we didn't lose the data, it just didn't come through on the first try. When Phil's manager for the system comes in the morning, Dennis Geeson, he looks at our dashboard and it'll say what percent of the meters came through that night and all the reads. And if we're at 98%, he pushes a button and then the system goes out and tries to read that other 2% and then brings it home. So the meter data is not lost. It just didn't get there on the first try for some reason.
What are typical reasons for not getting there on the first try?
A variety. We're using radios. It's a radio signal, and it's at a very low wattage. Somebody could park a great big semi in the way, but then we get it back. And usually if we're missing data, it's load profile. It's those 15-minute pieces, but the actual meter read, what you're going to bill off of, that's always there. And then we can, still get the information later on.
When you have to, let's say it misses some and you have to reacquire the data, does it reacquire across the whole network or just the
No.
missing?
Those meters.
Okay.
Yeah. And at any time, I want to make sure I hit this so I don't run out of time. Pick on you, I don't remember your name. If she's moving out of her apartment, and then it's going to go back to you as the landlord, right now, Paul's got to send a guy out there to read the meter because it's going to change.
Yeah.
And then you put in new carpetings and paint. And then you rent it out 2 weeks later to somebody new. And then the guy's got to run out there and read it again. And then 3 days later, it's the end of the month, and then they read it again. With our system, someone sitting in the office would read the meter. It would literally go out there, ping that 1 meter, read it, and bring it back. So the customer service person sitting at their desk would never have to leave. We don't ever roll a truck. So that's all doable, 1 at a time, or as many as you want. Go ahead. Paul asked, AMI versus traditional. He's got a lot of this information, and we wouldn't be here unless you were looking at it, so I'm keeping this pretty basic. Traditional meters. What's the advantage? There's no new cost. You can keep doing what you're doing today, and it doesn't cost you any money, other than what it's costing you today, and it works. You send out a bill every month, and people get their bills. The disadvantage is you're only seeing the system once a month. The other one is you're reacting to problems. You can't be proactive, which you had brought up earlier. Ken? Well, with AMI, there is a labor savings. You're no longer sending someone out there to read a meter every month, or even if somebody moves in and out of apartment, or to disconnect. It all can be done from the office. If there's an outage, power goes out, those meters, each one, oh, there's no power. How can it send its information? We've got a small capacitor in there. And that sends it out, I'm out. And that's a priority message. Everybody grabs that and delivers that ahead of everything else. And it's already working. If you call and talk to the guys at Prairie du Sac, they were just getting started. They had about a fourth of the electric meters in. And storm came, and it turns out it was a squirrel and some lines on the trees. They were getting ready to run around because the phones were ringing, I'm out, I'm out. It's like, hey, wait a minute, before we just drive around town, look for the problem, let's do this WPPI thing. And they have a site where it basically just populates on Google Earth. Here's a spot where the people are out. And the guys looked at, you know what, it's got to be that fuse right there. And they went to that fuse, it was open. Okay, so we know it's down, oh, there's a squirrel, and then further down was a branch. It cut their outage time dramatically. They love it. And they've had 2 more instances since where something went wrong. They got a lot of squirrels in Prairie du Sac and causing them problems. So the outage is working. Voltage monitoring. The guys up in Waupun now are starting to look at where's our low voltage, and let's deal with that. Demand reduction and load shedding is for the future. You get billed every month on when you hit your highest point for the whole month when you used energy use. The only way you can get individuals to change their habits is if they know what they're doing. The time of use rates, if you get into that. And that's where it's easier to explain to someone how to get rid of electricity if you can show them when and where they're using it. The information is there. I'm going to go through the water a little later when we hit the water, but I'll show you some of the leak reports that Phil had talked about and burst. This one's harder to measure, energy theft. But everywhere we put these in, you find it, and sometimes it's not theft, it's electricians, local guys who are doing what they shouldn't. They're never supposed to pull a meter, but they do. And the meter reader doesn't realize it till they go there next month, and the little seal that they have, oh, somebody took my seal off, and then they put a new one on. Now, when Paul goes in the morning, he's going to see that meter at 2144th Street was out yesterday. Oh, and then it came back on 2 hours later. And you check with the guys, were they out there? No. Well, somebody was, and then they can go look at it and see what's going on. It hit the paper a couple of years ago up in Wisconsin Dells. They didn't have this kind of a system, and one of the hotels was pulling the main meter for their hotel and the little water park every afternoon at 5 o'clock. And the next morning at 8 o'clock, they put the meter back in. And their meter was literally in a closet with no light. And it went on for 4 months before the meter reader realized his seal wasn't on there. So they would have caught it right away with our system. Disadvantage, it costs money. You're going to have to buy all new meters. There's a cost there. Next, implementation step by step. How am I doing on time, Ken? I got 5 minutes. All right. First step with us is a contract between Elster and Lake Mills. And this is a contract that WPPI has reviewed and approved. You don't have to use it, but it's a first step. Their lawyers went through it. From there, we schedule a kickoff meeting. There's a couple of phone calls. We bring in a project manager. You will have one person from Elster, from Raleigh, who is responsible for your project. So if it's water, if it's electric, if it's gatekeeper, you don't care what, he's the guy. You also have Kenny and I at every one of these meetings. Then the next step is we set up calls that happen every week or every other week, depending upon what's going on, so we can keep track of, okay, you ordered this, are they there yet? Here's when they're coming, here's when the training's going to go. The big thing is we got to get gatekeepers in. We can't talk to them, so then we get the gatekeepers installed. Ken? Gatekeeper. This is what they look like. This is a gatekeeper on the well house in Waupun. Here's one in Sturgeon Bay. It's at their substation. It's on the substation hut. They have very nice substation huts. And here's one at Broadhead, which looks like a tin outhouse at their substation. But again, there's our gatekeeper.
Is there an antenna associated with that, or is the antenna in that box?
The antenna's in the box. And so far on every full deployment, it's a good question, where we've got lots of meters, we haven't had any issues. On some of the towns where we're doing just the large power, I'm going to pick on Jefferson, they're not too far away. They were my first headache. I'd like to say I had hair before that one happened, but I didn't. If you're familiar with Jefferson, the north sub is a full mile out of town. Nothing's near it. And we were communicating, but not well. We put an antenna up. I worked with Phil's guys They went out there, I'm not going up in the bucket, they did. And so we pulled a remote antenna out of the box and went up 20 feet on the pole, and it solved the problems. And we've done the same thing now at New Holstein, and I'm going to be doing it at River Falls for those situations.
Okay.
Great question. We can do the same thing if we have an individual meter that's having trouble. Maybe the meter is was on the outside of the building, but the factory moved out around it. And now we've got trouble. We've got one at Ameriquip in New Holstein that was like that, and so we ran an antenna out the building and up. And the antennas look like salt shakers. They're just little guys.
Yeah.
But we do have a solution with an antenna if we need it.
Okay.
After we get the gatekeepers, the electric meters go in first, because the water's got to hop from them. And the guys do that just like they would change out any other meter. If a meter goes bad or if somebody moves in, they do the same process. Next. So my meter, I'll do the quick. It's bidirectional out of the box. So you're not paying extra. If somebody adds solar or wind, it'll already do it. I talked about the 4 channels. There really is only 2 upgrades if you want to pay for them. One would be that disconnect. So someone in an office can push a button and turn the power off. That's an adder, $33. The other one is Zigbee, and that's a communication from the meter, if you want it, into the house. For a while, that seemed like the way everyone was going to go. So you'd have some kind of monitor in your side of your house, and my meter would talk to it. But now with the way the industry seems to be going, instead of that extra cost, if he can get the reads every single day, and he said username and password. They've got it for their large power, and at some point it'll be available for individual houses. And then you can just do it on your smartphone or your home computer, so you don't have to pay for that. But that is an option. That's $13 if you want it. We've got a couple of towns who've done that. Ken? And this is my disconnect. Whoop, back up. One thing here. We have the most robust disconnect in the industry. You could turn the switch in here, turn the power off and on every day for 20 years. That's how long that switch is rated for. Hopefully no one's making you turn the power off and on that many times, but it's that strong. And the reason you want it that strong is you get power off and on. That's spark. You do not want something causing a fire. So our switch is amazing. I'm proud of it. Next. 3-phase meters.
Oh, question.
Sure.
In regard to that, is there any kind of warranty or insurance coverage for possible fire?
There's a warranty on the meter, 2 years. I don't know of any special fire, but what I can tell you is this. If you Google, you find meter fires with smart meters. Elster has never yet had one instant, not one, where someone said, our meter started a house fire. That's not our meter. That's somebody else's.
Hey, Bill, just along those lines, and I think we've talked about this, if we disconnect someone remotely, can we give them full power back, or is it they have to go touch something and actually energize it themselves?
They don't energize it themselves. And I got to watch how I word this. The Wisconsin Public Service Commission today says you can cut their power. But their practice, what they recommend or what they want you to do when they pay their bill, they want someone to physically go to that house and say, hey, the power's coming back on. The old story about there's a pizza box laying on the stove, nobody's home, the power comes on, the pizza box is fire in the house. So that's what the public service wants. Your guy would need to call it. Some WPPI communities are doing it that way. They make a phone call and say, hey, we're going to turn the power back on. You paid your bill. Most people pay their bill and they want that on right away. And they say, look, you're supposed to be home before I turn it on. You're supposed to have somebody home when we turn the power on. So that's going to depend upon how you set it up. Okay. If a tree comes down and your guys go out, put the wires back up, they don't go talk to the 8 houses that were out before they put the fuse back in. They just fix it and put the fuse back in. No one's telling those people. So that's an aside. Our 3-phase meter, I'll make it quick and short because we're out of time. It's a good meter. It's so good. Census uses our meter for their 3-phase customers. I think that's enough of a reference. Next. After the electric is the water. And it starts with a training. It usually takes us 2 days. That water module, this is what it looks like. We're going to hang that on the wall in the basement or hang it from the pipe. And it simply wires up to the water meter. There's a battery in here. It's going to last for 20 years. The first thing we got to do is wake it up. And then we need to tell it what size pipe it's on. Before it can tell you, am I leaking, it's got to know what size pipe that is. Before it can say, hey, there's a burst, it needs to know if it's a 3/4 inch pipe or a 2-inch pipe. And if we're putting it on a factory that's using water all the time, you don't want him sending a report saying, hey, this one never shut off. Those are the things we program into this for that specific location. The other thing it does is it marries this radio signal to this meter number, which is married to one of the account numbers. So when the data comes in, it flows into the right bill. And we do all that with a little handheld out in the field. And that takes training. The electric's easy. Water takes training, which we do. What's that? Oh, good point. What Kenny said is, we don't care whose water meter you use. If your water department likes census meters, we work with them. We have a number of places on WPPI where we do that. The other one we've been working with is Badger. There's Badger meters made over Milwaukee land. Sturgeon Bay uses those. So we don't care what it is. We just want to talk to it. Go on. There. There's 2 water meters here. We're set up. This is a closet on an apartment complex up in Sturgeon Bay. And so this is the newest, that's their new water meter right there. It doesn't look like these. They're really flat, kind of pancake shaped. And here's my module. And they literally just cable tied them to the water pipe. And this is what New Glarus is going to do. This is the top of the water meter, and our module is going to be screwed right to the back of it. It's called an integral mount. Again, we just need to be hooked to it. We don't care how, and we don't care whose meter it is. Go ahead. And this is the gentleman who's doing it. Here's his handheld, the little stick, and he's programming them. Next, because I'm going to be running out of time. Synchronizes the clock. It sends out the information every 4 hours. It holds 100 days inside there, so if for some reason the communication dies, we've got 2 months before we lose anything. The battery, when it starts to go bad, 20 years from now, it sends out a warning, but you've got approximately 3 to 4 months before it dies. So you've got time to schedule to get down into that basement, Paul. That's why we do it that way.
What battery is it?
Lithium.
Lithium. There you go. Yep. It's potted. It's actually in this plastic. It's not replaceable. When it goes bad, we need a new module. It will tell a backflow, and if somebody's working in the basement and cuts this connection cord, it knows it lost communication and will send that through as an alarm. Okay? And so we continue with the deployment as far as this step-by-step. When we're done is when you guys say, yep, we got this, we're on our own. And then they basically sign off. And at that point, it switches to your first level of support, which is WPPI. Something goes wrong, that's part of what they own the head end, and then if they can't solve it, then they call us. But that's how we work together. Next. Reports. I'll go through these quick. This is the one Phil was talking about where it compares, gives you line loss. How much power did they sell versus what did the meters read? And the difference is how much energy you lost somewhere along the way. And now they can do the same thing with water. Next one. I like this. Here is somebody's house, and on the 29th at 11 o'clock they turned the power off remotely. They paid their bill, and so 3 days later they turned it back on remotely. And if there's various meter events, things going on, this is where it shows up. Here's a tamper. Here's a regular power outage. Something went wrong, and the power went out, and then the power went back on. And it was off for approximately 3 hours. Tree on the line, maybe the guys were doing working, whatever. But that's where Paul's guys would look at it. Usually it's an operations manager to say, hey, we had an outage. Was that us on purpose or something else going on? Next. High water use. This is where WPPI looks at the interval, how much is being used, and if it jumped dramatically, then they can go talk to those folks and say what happened. If it's the feed mill, you know, you kind of expect that something went on. But if it's an individual house and their water use jumped by 700%, something's going on. Maybe they filled the pool, the hot tub, I don't know. But it'd be nice to be proactive and call them up. Because what you don't want to find out is, oh, they're in Florida for the winter. Now they got a pool in the basement. It'd be nice to know about that on day one instead of 3 weeks from now. Next one.
So in other words, it could detect a water heater break or something
Yes.
like that?
Yes. It's looking at how much water is being used, and if there's a big change, it flags his system. And on the other end, it's saying, let me get my marker here, or try to, we'll go to, I think this is losing battery. They go for 48 hours. And if somebody's using water for 47 out of those 48 hours, there's something going on. There's a leak. Most households, when everybody's asleep, the water's not going. If the toilet's running all night, though, it's using a gallon an hour, it's going to show up and you can be proactive. Wisconsin Rapids, when they first got it, their customer service people in the office, as he said, there were a lot of these when they first got going, and so they were calling everybody every day. And it's one of those where I'm gone all week. If we got a leaky toilet, it's going to wait till Friday when I get home. So what they've internally done is if they see that leak 3 days in a row, then they make a phone call. If it's a burst pipe, they call right away. But if it's a slow leak, you know what? Maybe they just didn't get the shower turned all the way off. Tomorrow it'll be off. Let's not make the phone call. So internally, when they see it 3 days in a row, then they make the phone call. But still being proactive instead of reactive. Next one. This is my last one. I got to be up to 20 minutes. So I apologize for talking fast. Why Elster? So as you're trying to decide, if you decide to go forward, you're going to hear from the other guys in a few minutes. They use a tower. Instead of a mesh, all their meters talk directly to one tower. With my mesh, if something goes wrong, I can hop to another gatekeeper. We're basically self-healing. That's a big difference. If your town grows and you need something additional capacity, that gatekeeper you saw in those pictures is $880. So you can add 2,000 more people with an $880 investment for the infrastructure. It's quick, it's easy. With the other guys, then you got to buy a whole new tower. We have the strongest disconnect meter in the industry. It's never going to create any problems. My standard meter is ready for solar or wind if it comes. It's already doing it. You don't have to pay extra. We've never had a report of a fire. And so that's kind of where we sit. Some of the other guys have put a thermistor you'll find on the internet in their meters, and it's basically a little switch so that if the meter gets really hot, it stops the electricity. They're trying to stop those fires that you read about on Google. We don't have to do that. We've never had that problem. Whew. There's my 20 minutes. Questions?
What frequency band do you use for the mesh?
Good question. I should have hit that. We're using 900 megahertz. It's a free frequency. What you got to remember, and when people hear free, they think, oh, there's going to be all kinds of trouble and interference, and oh, if somebody opens their garage door or turns on a baby monitor, now it's going to interfere with my meter reads. That's not true with our system. The 900 megahertz frequency is a range from 902 to 928. So we've got 26 different frequencies we can use, and our system constantly hops from one to the other. It never stays on one. And this meter may be on 902, that one's on 920. It's always moving around. We do that for two reasons. One, it's so we don't have interference. Out of all those utilities we listed working with WPPI, we have not had one case of interference yet. The other reason is for security. It's really hard to hack a system if you don't know where their frequency is, and it's always changing. It's part of our inherent built-in security for your system, is we're constantly hopping and moving around.
Is it randomized?
Yes. And if it picked 904, and boom, I bumped into Kenny's baby monitor, it will automatically jump to another frequency. Like I say, and we're working in some very large cities. Orlando, Memphis, and we're not having, Toronto, huge city, and we're not having any issues with the frequency. Yes, it's there, and I guess the potential is there, but it's because of how our system is built that it's always jumping and moving. The other thing you got to remember, when it sends out that signal, its meter read, that takes about 1.25 seconds, and then it's done. I'm not doing anything with that frequency for the next 4 hours. So it's just a short burst of information and I'm done. Any other questions? That's a good one.
Yeah, let me, if I can just jump in, Bill, and members of the board, I messed up here. I didn't bring the budget numbers with me.
Do you want me to bring it up?
Yeah, do you have those, just so they can get an idea of cost? I apologize. Yeah, I don't even have a good excuse. I didn't have time to make one up.
See, you didn't have time.
This will get me more time.
Requested modeled in summary. Go. So for the meter cost, 200, Kenny, you can talk. What's the meter cost? 280,000?
Another.
The water modules, another 260,000. And what you're looking for is the bottom line when you do all the service and everything else for your entire system. We're looking at $614,000.
And that, just to be clear, that's every water meter, every electric meter, that's all of the gatekeepers, all the training. Yeah, and so that would be, if we were to deploy it all in 1 year, that would be our cost for the year. And the
Plus
thing,
whatever you pay him.
yeah, there is a monthly, is it a monthly?
There's a licensing fee,
Yeah.
program startup fee, and then there's also ongoing,
Yep. Yep.
Is that part of the 614?
No, that's just us. That's between you and WPP.
Oh, okay.
For our,
The Elster system is $25,000, so that's the startup of the program. And the ongoing costs of the WPPI program are $5,000 per year, flat rate, and 50 cents per meter per year, so per electric and water.
Right.
You said 50 cents?
Yes.
And I'll just make, I think Bill mentioned that this is scalable. So in other words, I think it's true with both systems. We would not have to make that investment in the first year. We could do this over, it would, over 10 years if we wanted, which I don't think we want to, but just by doing a little coordination with the gatekeepers and where we actually put our meters, we could do this over the course of several years.
we got a number of towns who are spreading over 3 and 4 years. And then other ones who Curtis-Sack planned on that way, and the electric guys didn't like reading meters, they were running around with route books. And so every spare minute they had, they were throwing in new meters. And now they're actually helping the water guys so that part can get done. Any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'll go get the other.
Okay.
Steve, do you anticipate we're going to get any feedback from the public as far as privacy issues? I mean, I hear that's like one of the biggest obstacles to overcome with these kind of smart meters is that people think you're spying on them or you're able to,
I guess we'll see.
get personal information about what their habits are based on whether they're using based on their water, electricity usage. I know there's concerns that people you'll be able to know whether somebody's on vacation.
I can address that a little bit too.
Can you use the microphone so our people watching by television can hear?
One thing WPPI does is encourages members to educate your customers on this. And before you start your program, we have a media kit available that you can do bill stuffers, ads, to say why you're doing the change, inform the public why you're doing the change, and then dispel some of those myths. You know, we can't tell what you're doing by seeing your meter reads. We can tell, you know, daily usage patterns, but we can't get down to any details there. The radio interference, there's a lot of studies out there that it does not cause health problems. Like the Elster meters transmit, I believe, for a second or close to a second every 4 hours. So it's not a lot of radio transmission compared to the cell phone coverage going around communities. But I would encourage you to take advantage of WPPI's media information available and get that out before you do the program, because you don't want to make it look like you're sneaking something into the community behind the customer's back. You want to make sure they're aware, yeah, this is something that you're doing and why you're doing it for good utility reasons.
I think our approach is that, you know, there will be some that are going to be concerned about their privacy, or there are others that are going to be excited about the opportunity to monitor and be able to manage their systems. To a certain extent, you know, you got the smart TVs now and all the other stuff that I've been watching people say that my TV can hear me and send it out to people who are, so you kind of have to just be prepared to deal with it and know that there are people who are going to be concerned, and if you use it properly, it pretty much settles down.
And if you don't mind me jumping in, Evansville had the same concerns, and like I say, they're getting ready. They have an energy fair in their community once a year, and for the last 3 years, they've had Kenny and I standing at one of the tables during their energy fair so people can come up and ask us about AMI and ask us about the privacy, and they're going to know what I'm doing, or, oh, this is going to cause brain cancer, and that way we can address all those things right up front. The more information, the better. Especially if you talk to them about, look, you can actually change your rates to a time of use which your utility offers and save money. You can't know if you can save money unless you know when you're using the power. We're just providing that information. And then the one I use for the radio frequencies and the potential danger, we're sending out a signal that lasts less than a second and a half once every 4 hours, and it's, if you put a baby monitor in your crib so you can hear the baby cry while you're in the living room, that has 7 times stronger radio signal than my meter. And my meter's only for a second and a half, and you're leaving that in the crib with the baby for hours. That's how safe we are.
I think people are more concerned about privacy, though, and especially when you brought up, well, you could call, you know, we would call them if the toilet was leaking. If you start calling people you're going to freak them out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's kind of an off-on issue, though, because if we don't call them, they're upset.
When they get a
Wanna know
large
why
water
we didn't get a
bill.
hold of them, and now they don't want to pay their bill, or, you know, if we have a problem with their meter and we show up to fix it, and they say, why didn't you call me, or why didn't you give me some kind of notification? So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place on some of those issues, and so this is just a better opportunity to deal with it quicker and let them know, hey, you know, if you want to pay us more money for having a water leak, we're fine with that. We'll put you on that list every 30 days.
The do not call list, huh?
Yeah. I missed a little, thanks, you guys, appreciate it. I missed a little bit of this, but this is one of the reasons why we're just beginning the discussions now, so that we've got time to do some education, let people ask questions and get familiar. I'm kind of the opinion that we're maybe a generation away from an official smart meter where people are going to be monitoring their usage and making adjustments. But I think we're at a really good point to start for the benefit of the utility right now. If we're seeing high water losses, these sorts of things, that we know what's going on. And just back to your point again, Robin, we do call people every month now when we notice that there's high electric usage or high water usage. So we're kind of doing that now. But I personally have no desire to get into the big brother business. I just don't think people are really excited about that either.
Well, you're giving up more information to Google every
Yeah.
time you use it.
Right. We did move the TV out of our bedroom once we found out it was watching. But that's another topic for another night.
Kids were listening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tim and Associates, we'll let you take over.
I'm going to have everything set up real quick here. This is just some supporting documentation. Boring. Go to sleep quick. There you go.
Thanks, Tim. You bet. Appreciate it. He had stress fractures for the first half of the season. So he came back.
Just to give you guys a quick introduction, my name is Tim West. I'm with HD Supply out of Wisconsin. I've been a technical guy for 15 years and recently, for the last 3 years, technical sales. So actually, I did a lot of support for McNeil's on.
Tim, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. Can you grab that microphone over there and use that? Then our guests at home, you can take that right out of there and walk around, or you can stand there, whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Actually, I'll stand here. To start again, my name is Tim West. I'm with HD Supply. I'm the rep out of Wisconsin. I've been technical support for 15 years, especially for Lake Mills. The last 3 years, I've been meter technical sales. With me, I have Todd Bredesen, he's our North Region technical sales guy, an AMI specialist, and Bob Meyer, the electric specialist from HD Supply.
Great, thank you. I am going to do that shortly. All right, I have to look at it from side view. All right, so my name is Todd Bredesen, and I'm here to help out Tim for tonight. I'm from HD Supply, and I'm from the Minneapolis area, so I already know. You have to tell me. It's baseball season, I already know, so I'm good. Okay. We're here representing HD Supply. The three of us all work for HD Supply, but the company that we're talking about is Sensus and the Sensus FlexNet system. So we always start off with a slide about the companies that we represent, and to let you know, Sensus is a very large company. The important thing to know about Sensus is that they make water, electric, and gas. They used to be a water meter manufacturing company exclusively, and have been in the gas meters for quite a while, and also been in with the electric meters since the advent of the solid-state electric meters in 2000. Headquartered in Raleigh, and when I first started 34 years ago, a trip to Uniontown, Pennsylvania would include a tour of a foundry, and we'd all look at brass water meters, and right now everything has become solid state, even in the water meter industry. And when you go take a tour of the facility now, you're going to look at hardware and software engineers, and there's where we've gone in the 30 years when we're talking about water meters and metering in general. So my name's Todd Bredesen, Tim West, HD Supply, out of our New Berlin office, and Bob Meyer lives up in Osceola, Wisconsin. And this slide, noting that HD Supply is a very large company as well. The HD came from the name Home Depot when we were owned by Home Depot, and many of our different lines of business, we're in HD Waterworks, but there's also Power Solutions, Home Interior, so there's multiple facets. HD Supply is now the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol HDS. But we have 4 branches in Wisconsin: Hudson, De Pere, New Berlin, and Sun Prairie. So when we're talking about water meters, electric meters, gas meters, and our network, and the way we're going to be reading meters and talking to our network, we have some fundamental differences with many of the competitors we compete against in the electric industry and in the water industry. Tim and I are water guys, so I'm going to focus on the water part because I know that well, and Bob's on the electric side, and he'll be talking about electric meters shortly. When you're talking about the network and we're talking about RF, I have to go back a ways because when I first started, the very first network that we used was a product that Sensus called Phone Read. We'd use phone lines and everything else with modems. And many years ago, everybody decided they'd get in with RF and start working with radio frequencies. Those were walk-by, drive-by, and you'd have a walk-by, drive-by radio read meters. And the first industries that adopted that were northern utilities that were operating in gas and water because the meters were inaccessible. Electric meters were on the outside. They were kind of like late adopters, but a lot of that early RF stuff was in water and it was in gas. And the very first ones were designed to work in the unlicensed band, between the 902 and 928 ISM band. And to this day, pretty much every water and gas meter manufacturer still has legacy products that operate in that band. And they operate in that band for one very important reason, and they started in that band for a very important reason, because it's unlicensed and it's no cost. And it wasn't much to develop for that. And when it would work sufficiently, because as you drove by, I needed to transmit readings and communicate one way from here to out by the street. And it was sufficient, and everybody got by with it, and it was fine. Well, what Sensus did, and you have to understand the genesis of their system, is they bought a company called AMDS. And the AMDS people had developed another product before this, before they got out and got it back in and had non-competes, and when they expired, they got back into the utility industry. And what they did was they wanted to have a national frequency. They wanted to go licensed because they wanted to use higher power, and as a result, through an acquisition, it became the Sensus FlexNet system. So what is FlexNet? FlexNet there's 3 basics on an RF system. How loud can you speak? What that means is how many watts can you transmit? How loud can you go? How powerful are your transmitters? And the way the Sensus topology is set up, we want to talk from our transmitter into an antenna or a tower. So for this particular town, we're looking at maybe 2 collectors is what we'd have on top of water towers. Number 2 position is how well can you hear? So many of the competitors we have need to transmit from here to there and hop around, or have short-range radios and require that you put antennas maybe 40 to get in a sweet range, maybe 40 feet off the ground. And the Sensus system is designed to go down to a negative 122 dB, which is a very quiet state. And the antennas that we have are 11 feet tall. We use coax cable that would run down, typically installed on a water tank, 100 feet above ground, maybe 150 feet above ground. The highest that I know of, we have one downtown Minneapolis at 568 feet above ground. And that's designed to reduce the infrastructure that you need to read your equipment, to establish your network. And number 3 is how noisy is the background. And that's the real key between licensed and unlicensed with the licensed frequency. And the licensed frequency that we're talking about for the FlexNet system is actually purchased by Sensus through FCC auction. Much of it is the spectrum that was abandoned when pagers disappeared. So we're operating in frequencies about 890 up to about 960, excluding the 902 to 928 ISM band, which is still free and restricted to have so much power. So we're operating at 2 full watts. We can hear down to minus 122 dB with 11-foot antennas, thick coaxial cable so there's no loss, so that we can hear long distances away in very, very small RF noise signals. And then we operate in our own licensed band that Sensus actually owns the frequency to. And as a user of their FlexNet system, you're a licensee of their network and their licensed frequency. Any questions on that? Going as fast as I can. This is a really busy slide, but what I want to explain on this one is we have the single tower architecture. So we are going to communicate directly from these blue devices down here, gas, water, electric meter, and they're going to talk directly to that antenna, to that tower. And you're going to be, that tower is connected to the servers and the R&I servers over in Sun Prairie at the WPPI offices. And then you begin accessing your data through the web portal. But these devices down here, demand response endpoints for the electric, all the water meters, lighting control, SCADA response, all of that stuff ties back in through the Sensus FlexNet architecture and the Sensus FlexNet network. Anything comes up, just raise your hand, I'll slow it down. So what we require then on that network is we're going to install an antenna that'll be on top of a tower, like I said, water tanks, taller buildings, the higher the better, and that gives us more range. We require less infrastructure. This FlexNet base station, this is just a typical base station. There's many, and we just size it for what we need to have the correct bandwidth and the number of meters that are going to be underneath our network. And this gives you an indication of one of the ones that we can use. This slide shows one that actually has, this one actually has air conditioning, heating in it, so it's meant to be installed outdoors. Newer ones are installed indoors, or if they're installed outdoors, there's even smaller ones now that that take up very little space and can be pole mounted. And this gives an indication where we've moved a lot recently is many of the customers a few years ago were owning their own R&Is, regional network interface, their own server boxes, and they were housed in the IT rooms or the data rooms in the local utility, and everything is pretty much moving to hosted services. Software as a service, hosted. This is the environment that you guys would be operating in because this data center is over in Sun Prairie at the WPPI offices. And the Sensus FlexNet system actually we can use that network for a lot of the products that are available underneath that network. They have load, we can read, Bob's going to get into this a little later, about a lot of the load profile, a lot of the information that can be brought back through the electric meters. But it's a true two-way system. In other words, we're able to talk to and actually listen to all the endpoints that are out there, so load control modules, and even the new water meters are going to be two-way. So there'll be pressure sensing, temperature sensing, and remote disconnect shut-off valves built into the water meters that'll be available in 2015. Outage alarms, this shows on one of our sites down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that the outage alarms, when graphed out, graphically show where that tornado path went, right through the heart of that, right through the University of Alabama. What we like to do, and this is a prop study for DeForest, Wisconsin, and it shows how we'll map out and do a prop study, and we'll take all your assets, all the water meters, and geocode those and map those out. And in DeForest, we had 2 antennas up here, and this represents roughly about 8 to 10 miles across. The colors represent, green would be like 5 bars on your phone, blue's good, green and blue are good, yellow's okay, white probably not so much. But all the meters are contained well within the green area there, making sure that we have sufficient network coverage for those meters. Also, when we put up our network, we have a 98.5 read rate success that's guaranteed. So all the meters will be able to be guaranteed to read up to 98.5%. I talked to a customer of mine in Blaine, Minnesota. They got about 18,000 meters, and currently they're not reading 26 of the 18,000 over 36 square miles.
What are typical reasons for not reading a meter?
Not reading a meter in the city of Blaine?
Or in general?
In general, I'll tell you, a lot of it's in wires are getting cut. Well, there's not one typical one. There's a whole bunch of ones. And what in this particular case, a lot of the water meters are installed and the transmitters are installed inside. So if you discover something and you want to go check it out, you need an appointment to get back in. And the ones that are easy to service up there, they had, some older parts of town had the touch pads wired to the outside of the house on a water meter. Well, our transmitters can read those, and they can read in 3-wire. So it really doesn't make any difference. If there's existing two-wire, I'm a big fan of that, because just because if you wanted to go check something, it's your property, it's on the outside.
I don't know if you're, I think you're answering a question differently than what I asked. What I was asking,
Yeah.
what I was interested in knowing is, you mentioned 98.5% guaranteed.
Correct.
Nothing's ever 100% in the world, or
Correct.
very little. What are typical reasons for not reading a meter remotely?
There isn't any one typical reading. With the water meters, battery, there's wire conditions, but once a network's been established, you're probably looking at that. Once a network's been established and we know that we've got coverage on everything, then it's going to be one of those and something over here, ID mismatches in the database, that kind of a thing. But once the networks, I mean, if there's gaps in the network, all the water meters, all the electric meters actually can act as a repeater if you need to be. And when these meters are being installed, either water or electric, the water meters, when they're installed, can go into 3 different modes. I don't want to get too technical here, but they kind of analyze their network when they talk to the network and log on. And they can go into a normal mode. As I'm talking to you right now, don't consider the amplification. And then if they don't hear directly to that tower, they'll go into a different mode. They'll go into a tri-mode, which would be couple messages in normal, one message in what we call boost mode. But since we can't increase the power, we slow the message down. That message might get through. And then the third one we'll throw out is a buddy mode, switch to a completely different frequency and talk to a receiver in that electric meter. If I'm obstructed and if I can't get wired to the outside on a water meter, I can talk to an electric meter that's just above ground, and that's got clear line of sight into a transmitter. Any of the electric meters, because any electric meter can act as a repeater. So once the network's established, you're pretty much just kind of in maintenance mode. And my point earlier was, much of it has to do with, if something were to fail, if there's ever a problem, it's important to get out there and handle that right away, both in the database, in the RNI, and also out in the field. And my point on those other ones, it's really nice to have some of these radio transmitters on the outside rather than on the inside. It's just easier for field staff to get back out there and correct any problem. So what one particular problem? A battery, a rogue battery, a bad connection, that kind of a thing.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that was a long answer.
Just one other part to that then, the data's still there, right? Even if you can't reach the meter, the data's there, so when you can reach it, you can access the data?
Yeah, the radio on the water meter will hold approximately 7 days' worth of hourly reads, and every message that it sends will continue with that 7 days' worth of messages before the data bucket gets filled up, but it'll send that message out to backfill, and then the database will accumulate all that. So yes, there's redundancy built in, and of course, if there was a problem with the transmission and you couldn't get through with the radio or somebody cut the wire, the water meters themselves are still all encoded, so as soon as it's hooked up again, it's back up and running with the correct meter, so there's no data loss or no water consumption loss.
But suppose you've got, like Tuscaloosa, a tornado going through and you don't get to it in a week time.
All right, let's take it's going to be a really disastrous situation, right? Tuscaloosa, your water towers fell down, which is about the last thing that's going to fall down in town, but let's say it is. Let's say there's a tornado and it goes through the central offices. We got meters out there recording power and recording water consumption, right? And that stuff's going through. Assuming that the radios in the house is still there and we've got the meters that are working, if these devices don't talk to that tower in about a 24-hour period of time, they will revert back to walk-by, drive-by mode. They'll actually take a step backwards and you'll be able to interrogate them with a device in a truck or a vehicle, which we have. Yes, they retain the data. So you're going to have that information available, and you'll have different ways to collect it, worst-case scenario. Yep. And in this particular case, as long as we're on this prop study in DeForest, pretty much it's 100% redundancy there, because any one of those towers would go out, the other ones would read it. So it's each meter's pretty much getting read by both.
Do we have much of a problem with, let's say, Boston right now with its 8 feet of snow?
No. In this case, okay, so if we were to take this and run this prop study and say, we're going to take all the water meters, and this really goes away with the electric meters, but if we're going to take all the water meters only and not have the ability to have an electric meter this high off the ground, you would see that green area be reduced. If we took all those water transmitters and put those on the inside of houses, that green area would be reduced. It would still well cover the service area. So does snow affect RF propagation? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yep.
That's not going to happen here.
Can I quote you on that when you have 10 feet?
Sure, I'm sure Rudy will back me up on that.
We threw in some quick slides here to give you an idea. Did you deal with this at all with the MDM and the different?
I just talked a little bit about, why we have an MDM, but it does.
Great. Okay, so these are slide shots of a long-term data storage solution that is not the offering for WPPI. But it gives you an idea of what some of the customer service representatives we were looking at and some of the analytics that are available. So we're getting lots of data and we're recording lots of data. And it allows you and the customer service people to deal with customers and do some analytics based on your distribution system and collection system. In the water side of things, these are electric meters tied into a transformer. So we could take each one of these electric meters and make them a virtual meter, tie that back into the transformer, make each one of these, if these were water meters, tie those into the lift station that they were emptying into. Because right now, everybody's water meter is related maybe in a book and a route number because that's what how we used to read them. So everybody over here is in one single book because you're neighbors. But right over there, you last two are going to be dropping into a different lift station. And so your I&I, water in, water out, to analyze that lift station could be considered differently, and it's all independent of billing. And this just shows, these slides were showing some of the screenshots on the MDM offering that we have. And this just shows some of the web portal. People would be able to dial in and take a look at their usage. The next thing that we wanted to do, talk a little bit about the water meters before Bob comes up and talks about the electric meters. We were talking out in the hall about how for 100 and some years, water meters haven't changed. Big, heavy brass. Up until recently, there was lead in that for machining properties of the brass. And the meters, the measuring chambers used to be oscillating pistons or nutating discs. And you just have electric meters that would have the mechanical motors in them and turning that dial around. Everything's changing. Census is leading the way in solid-state meters, not only in electric, but on the water side of things. And I wanted to bring up some of the advantages that we have in the residential smart meters that you guys currently use with the iPro. And most cities now are looking at ways to increase revenue without raising the rates. And we're seeing so many appliances now that are reducing their high flows, and it's becoming more and more apparent and more necessary to start measuring some of the low flows and measuring every single drop that we possibly can on the iPros and in your residential applications. So the iPro is a meter that's completely solid state, no moving parts, operates on Faraday's law, and it's a mag meter. This particular meter is a mag meter, and it's unique in that it's a mag meter that operates in a residential environment. Every meter manufacturer pretty much has a mag meter line because they're very accurate, no moving parts, nothing to wear out, but most mag meters are large and they plug into the wall. This one is unique because it operates in 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, and is battery powered and guaranteed accurate for 20 years and guaranteed on the battery for 20 years. It has multiple alarms. Current version has these alarms, and I wanted to let you know that down here with the future capabilities in 2015 at the AWWA show in June, they'll be introducing one with a remote shutoff in the water meter built into the exact same lay length, so it'll plumb in exactly the same way, and it'll have temperature and pressure sensing as well. That information will be brought back through the FlexNet system and dumped into the RNIs and into the MDM data storage.
Same price as the older meters, right?
What's that?
Same price as the older meters, right?
Absolutely,
Okay, I thought so.
yes. As long as you pay us in $1950, I think, with taking inflation.
I assume the temperature is for being able to tell when the line's going to freeze?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That's not going to happen here either.
No. But when I was up in International Falls, they were very interested in that, because they'd have, like, last year the frost was down like 9 feet.
It was here too.
Bad. Bad, bad, bad. We wanted to show this slide also to let you know, I touched on it earlier, but these devices are migratable. So for the water meter side of things, the same device that we're going to sell somebody that's a fully deployed, like Alloway up in the De Pere area, fully deployed two-way FlexNet system, it's the same device we're going to sell to somebody who's going to go out and read it around with a handheld right now, because that's what we're talking about. And it's reverse. We have these smart points. There it is. The smart points here, walk by, drive by, and fixed base. The nice thing about that is, like we just said, if anything really bad or disastrous was happen, they revert back to the previous state and will answer to those other devices if they don't hear in that communication with the tower. These are the smart points. Down south, you'd see these things sticking up through meter pits. And for larger meters, maybe you might have a meter vault or something, or something that's a 2-inch hole, it threads through there. Typically, this is what's on the outside of the house. And it's 20-year battery life, leak detection, broken pipe, but it also, if you go back, all of these alarms that come through the smart meter and the iPearl, all of those alarms are serviced back through that smart point, the Sensus smart point. And it's a two-way device that's going to be two-way all the way down to the meter. So we're listening to what the meter's saying, all the alarms, and we're also being able to tell the meter what to do. And we have single and dual port touch couple devices, where I was kind of going before with that 3-wire and 2-wire. If communities have 2 wires out to remote devices or 2 wires out to a touchpad, these devices allow you to simply slip the remote over it, the radio over your touchpad, and configure it that way, and it'll read the meter, keeping it outside, preserving your 2-wire configuration. I like to see stuff on the outside. That's just me personally, because I see so many people, they can't get to it. There's so much, they may be understaffed, and without servicing some of those, it's nicer to have your equipment on the outside of the house. But your choice. But if you have 2-wire coming to the out and they finish the basement, now you can't really wire up a 3-wire. So it doesn't matter. 2-wire, 3-wire mode, they operate the same way. There we go. Electric, Bob. Thanks.
Hey, can I just ask you real quick here? And Tim, you and I may have talked about this, and I lost it, but if we were to purchase meters now and use our walk-by system, we could then migrate into the tower system, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
You would have to upgrade your handheld, and then you can start putting M's in, and that handheld would start reading your M's, and you could actually migrate to the tower system.
Okay.
So the handheld would read any of the old R's that you have in the system, and it would also read the M's.
Okay.
The other thing to think about is all your touchpads. If you look at any meters that you installed over the last 10 years, those meters, you could actually put, just to be safe, because the encoded technology has been around since '84, but any of your meters that you installed in the last 10 years, you can simply add a box and turn that into a fixed base system. And that's by just going over that 2 wires that you have going to the touchpad on the outside of your home.
Okay. And I should explain, for your information, the reason I asked that question is that we have, by far a majority of Sensus water meters in, and so that would be an easy migration there. And we have been working with Sensus over the last few years with a previous version of the AMR, and so we've been purchasing electric meters from Sensus for quite some time. This would just be a different meter, though. We wouldn't be able to use any of our existing AMR meters, correct? Is this something you're going to get into, and I don't mean to?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that's fine, I can step in at this point.
Go up to the mic. I know you have a loud voice, Bob, but you'll have to go to
It's
the
not
mic.
so good today, though, a little bit of a sore throat going. Those older electric meters that you have would not migrate forward. They are of an older technology that wasn't designed to work with the fixed base system. walk-by, drive-by. We do have the ability to read them in a walk-by, drive-by mode, but it isn't something that I'd recommend it. That wouldn't be a good investment at this point for you. The meter we'd be talking about today, the latest generation of electric meter that we have, we call the Generation 4 electric meter. And it is, for all intents and purposes, has all the power of a industrial type of meter, a commercial industrial type of meter. Traditionally, commercial industrial meters were very expensive, but they had a lot more functionality to them. For example, in an older KWH meter, older house meter that you had, typically only did one thing. It measured the KWH in one direction. And that's all it ever did. It counted forward, and that's it. If somebody took it out, plugged it in upside down for 2 weeks, pulled it back out and put it right side up, it would be missing a bunch of energy. The latest versions of these electronic meters that we sell are fully capable of basically everything that you want to do now and in the near term and probably even long-term future for residential purposes. We use terms like net metering, or for example, if somebody was to say like put a solar panel on their house and they want to backfeed into, okay, we can reprogram or reconfigure this exact meter over the air through the system to tell it that it is now a two-way meter, that I want to record how much is going from the utility into the house and how much the house sent back from the utility or to the utility. And it can keep that in separate registers, so to speak, and report that data back to the utility, to your billing system.
So in other words, if I put up solar panels or something like that and I'm feeding energy into the system, it would work on that?
Yep. The nice thing is we can reconfigure this meter over the air, so the utility doesn't have to go visit it. In the old days, you would have to buy a net meter, and you would have to go to that customer, take their original meter out, put the new meter in, so now it'd be a net meter. Okay? And so then you'd have to stock net meters and everything like that. All the functionality is built into the meter to start with. We just turn it on the ones that you want. Now, so net metering is one application. Time of use is another application that people talk about a lot these days with, for example, you might charge one rate for electricity from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. Commercial is pretty common already with commercial accounts, but it is becoming more common in the residential market as well. And these meters have the capability to be reprogrammed for that as well. We can store up to 7 different rate tiers, so you could have 7 different rates for electricity scattered throughout the day. And again, this meter can be reprogrammed over the air through the system without somebody actually physically having to go out and reconfigure the meter at the house, or you don't have to stock multiple different versions of meters. You're basically only buying one kind of meter, and all the functionality is there and can be turned on at any time, and it can be customized for each and individual location. So one person can have a net meter and the next person can't, and one person wants a time of use rate from 8 to 8, another one from 9 to 9, and the system can be set up to be configured for that. So the meter contains all that type of technology. In addition, these new meters also have the ability to measure reactive energy, which we've never seen in a single-phase meter before. And what that is going to allow you to do is to get a good picture of just how efficient your grid is out there. I mean, it's one thing for you to say, okay, we've got losses. I mean, the transformers and everything like that, there's a certain amount of power that get used up in the system. But depending upon the type of load that some of your customers may have, they might affect the quality of the power in certain areas of your system. But you don't know that unless you go around with power quality meters and do samples and all of this kind of stuff, and it's very expensive and very time consuming. This new type of metering and the metering technology that goes with it allows you to analyze your system chunk by chunk, turning on advanced features in one area, turning them off in another area, compensate for voltage drops by setting your alarms and stuff. So I mean, if you know you've got a low voltage in one area and you don't necessarily, it's not too low to be a problem, we can adjust the alarms for those. Or if you've got a critical infrastructure points that you want to monitor, that we can tie these to be more active meters that they report back their values more often, like for example pumping stations and things like that. If you don't have a SCADA system, Some people don't, but they really got to know if a pump isn't running. We can set up meters and use them as indicators to the system that will tell you, hey, this one was supposed to turn on and it didn't. Okay? In addition, one of the other features that is available, it's not required, it's available, but the remote disconnect option, you may have heard about that, but it's the ability to disconnect somebody for non-pay without a truck roll. So that's a piece of technology. I've got some utilities using these remote disconnect meters as remote switches for doing things like Christmas lights, and we have the ability to turn them on and off based on schedules. So, you know, it's a way of taking, you know, street lights and things like that. It can be done through technology like this that we never had before, at a price point that nobody's ever seen before, too. I mean, the amount of technology that's in a single-phase meter compared to a polyphase meter is, the price differential is 5 to 1 now. So, any questions yet, or? What do we got here? Okay, so just talking about a couple of the basic stuff that the meters, that all the meters do, or all of our meters that we'd be selling you, is the standard KWH, which is your standard residential type stuff, KVAH, or KVARs, if you will, this reactive energy. Okay, and we can do the net metering and the time of use and demand metering. Demand is another thing that in the older days, you used to have to pay extra for a demand meter. Every one of your meters could be a demand meter now. You can be collecting that data and using it for transformer sizing and system evaluation, but you don't have to, there's no extra cost in it to be able to accumulate that data now. Reverse energy detection, we talked about some of the really cool features. Reverse energy, I mentioned the older meters where you could turn them upside down and they would spin backwards, right? These newer meters are set up so that if somebody was to take one out, put it upside down and stick it back in, it'll throw a tamper alarm saying, hey, I got taken out, guy got put back in, but it's programmed electronically to automatically flag the fact that it's running backwards, but it's going to accumulate the energy going forward. It doesn't matter if the meter's in backwards or forwards, the energy's going to go up, but you're going to get notification that you got problems out there. Another neat feature is overclass amps. You might have situations out there where somebody might have a class 200 service or something like that, but they're actually drawing more power than they should. Now, you might pick it up if you had a demand meter, but if you don't have a demand meter, these have an automatic overclass amp detection built in them, and it sends out a flag saying, hey, I'm running way too heavy on this meter, something's going on. So, again, you get a kind of preemptive strike to be able to go out and figure out what's going on. A couple other features in here, temperature detection. We have a patented temperature detection system that'll tell you if you got a hot meter, if you got a hot socket. If they start to, hot sockets are fairly common in the industry, they happen, but we have the technology, especially with the remote disconnect, that if it detects a hot socket condition, it'll automatically shut itself off, protecting the service utility and everything. So, that's another feature. Any upgrades and stuff that need to be done, we have over-the-air firmware downloads, metrology updates, and reprogramming that can all be done over the air through the FlexNet system. You want me to jump into the benefits?
Before you leave that, you mentioned, I think, Ted, you mentioned that the water meters are accurate for 20 years. How about the electrics?
The electric meters come standard with a 1-year warranty. That's an industry standard. As far as accuracy goes, I can't speak to an accuracy curve over a lifetime. I can get you some information on that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay. Is there any difference in the testing requirements from the PSC for an electronic meter versus an older one?
No, no, there's no actual difference. I mean, they haven't actually addressed the electronic part versus the old mechanicals. From an electronic standpoint, they're similar to the newer technology in the water meters, where the electronic meters are more sensitive on light loads than older mechanical meters, where older mechanical meters, you got a certain amount of mass and everything, and you had to turn on a certain number of lights before it would actually start to spin. And in cases like some farm-type applications, there's a lot of them out there where a 350-watt sodium high-pressure bulb will never turn an electric meter, and that thing could be running 24/7, and it would never turn an electric meter until they turned other things on in that house. And then by the time they turn stuff off at night, the light's running, and you're not getting charged, you're not getting billed for it. These new electronic meters being more sensitive and not having any moving parts again, they are not susceptible to that. They have extremely small starting currents, and they can basically pick up about the energy that it takes to run your digital clock on your microwave. So you capture all of the revenue possible.
Thank you. Good.
Because I had some thoughts too about talking about that 98.5 read rate success we were talking about before, and you said what would cause them not to read. That 98.5 guarantee that's out there, that's to ensure that if we're going to come up and do our prop study like that DeForest prop study and showing 2 towers, and we're consistently getting read rate success of 92, we're hearing from 92% of the meters and not 98.5, that network is deficient, the design of it was deficient, so it's going to cost us some money to come up to the 98.5, and that's what that's about. And it's used to analyze the network to make sure that the network is sufficient and was designed sufficiently going forward. So that's kind of what I wanted to say, because I think we started talking and why would something fail on the network, or why would some of the endpoints fail. The read rate success is used to analyze and guarantee the design of the network. So we get back into this is just kind of recapping some of the benefits, and it's one of the big things that we have. I mean, there's licensed versus unlicensed. There's in the water and the electric, lots of vendors are licensed, lots more are unlicensed, and the reason is it costs something to get into the license. It costs Sensus a few dollars to buy up some spectrum. In about 2006, 2007, when they were buying the spectrum to take it nationally and get those national licenses. And the unlicensed must, according to the FCC Part 15, accept harmful interference. By the way, we used to have unlicensed. What you're talking about, the radio read products, those were all unlicensed. They operate in the ISM band. And the very first fixed network product that Sensus brought out was called FixNet, and it was in the unlicensed band. And we had problems with that because you design a network and then something changes. Particularly I can think of one we did one in Baldwin, which is now FlexNet. But we had a tower on the south end of Baldwin. There was a Ford dealership. We had a nice tower up pretty high, and we were receiving bad problems after it had been in for over a year on the north end of town. Well, a Quick Trip went in and put out that signal that goes from inside to outside where the red LEDs would go. Marlboros are on sale, 2 for 1 on Mountain Dew and that kind of thing. That operates it in the unlicensed band. And everything beyond that, the noise floor went up instantaneously. All it has to do is send out a signal out to the street, but it raised the noise floor. And susceptible meters to the north of that were pretty much unheard of after that. We had to expand the network. FlexNet, no, doesn't make any difference anymore because now it's in an unlicensed band and they can't bleed over. So it does give you some legal recourse and some protection being in the licensed band because it's your network and people can't bleed over in an RF. Also, I wanted to point out the ability, we have an iPearl meter, which is the most accurate water meter out there. It's also one of the smartest ones, but even though it's accurate with other radios that are on top of it, it is not as smart. So all the advantages of the iPearl and the new meter that's in the two-way configuration with the valve and the temperature sensing stuff, predicated on the fact that that two-way communication is to the meter, and most of that functionality, all of that functionality comes with the FlexNet transmitter on it. And the 2 watts of power, so you can read those bullet points there. So these are the guarantees that we go with: 20-year battery life on all water endpoints, 20-year battery life on the iPearl meter, 20-year new meter accuracy performance on iPearl meters. How many other meters, water meters, have that accuracy? Oh, that would be that many. 100% lead-free, it should be. It's based on a polymer body, polymer measuring tube. And the proposed infrastructure will provide 98.5 meter reading success rate without additional equipment. If the network fails to live up to that read rate success, it is on HD Supply and Sensus to supplement the network to get it to that. We use FCC bandwidth on a primary private frequency, and we are local, and we have local inventory. Tim, please, those are your customers.
Just to bring up a little bit of the experience that we've had over the last, get back to Todd's point. To get back to Todd's point, Sensus started out with the first generation, and that was the FixNet that was on the public band. The second generation was on the private band, but it was only a one-way system. We are now on our third generation, which is a two-way system, which makes a lot of these capabilities that these gentlemen have addressed capable. These are some of the deployments we've had over the last probably 5 years. We have 28 of them in Wisconsin. The largest probably being, which is not on the list, is Alliant. The smallest being Belgium, which has 700 water meters. This is just in Wisconsin. In the U.S., I would say we're over 500. We're over 500 deployments. So we've been around and we have experience in setting up fixed-base systems. Deployment process. Obviously, to start the entire, we would start with a propagation study first of all, which I think we've had one done before, but we would have to have another one done because of the age of the old one. We're safe to say that it's going to be 2, simply because it's a water and light. Once we get that, it's simply a notification. Order the infrastructure. We come in, we get the infrastructure set up. Network deployment, RNI, which a lot of this is falling on WPPI, correct, Phil? So basically for us, it's installing the infrastructure, making the communication back to WPPI, getting the antenna set up. Doesn't take long for us to get everything up and running. Planning assumptions. Obviously, we have some steps in process, basically to protect the utility and protect HD supply. One of the things is we will supply all the infrastructure, but the utility would be, or WPPI would be responsible for the backhaul, getting the information from the tower back to the RNI. Network TGBs, locators. We would hire the tower crews. Customer there, we have installation. Obviously, you guys would handle all the installation, and then any of the backhaul. Here it is again. Head-end requirements, billing interface, security, storage, acceptance, test parameters, backhaul technology, tower lease agreements, which normally that's why we stick to the water towers, because you guys actually own those assets. Cost analysis. I know that we can very easily come in and prepare a cost analysis for you. Some of the things that we would look at is we would look at the way your meters are testing as they're pulled. Another thing that we would look at is how many final reads you have, and we would pretty much generate a report on how much money you're going to save. I would say that there's some third-party studies out there, because these meters are so accurate on the low end as far as the water meters. They'll read down to a 300th of a, let's just give a scenario here. Toilet leak, slow toilet leak would be about 10 gallons an hour. That's roughly about 0.16 gallons per minute. All your disc meters, your nutating disc or your chambered meters, piston meters, they start measuring at 0.25 gallons per minute. A lot of them are going to miss that slow leak. The iPearl meter, obviously because of the magnetic technology, gets you down to 0.03 of a gallon. So you're going to catch all that low usage that you haven't caught in the past. There's a lot of people that write third-party studies on this. The best number I've seen is probably 5 to 7%. I mean, depending on your meters test, if your meters test out at 95%, you're looking at 5% right there. So all that stuff is getting thrown into the cost analysis study, and we can have one of those done for you guys. So basically, in a nutshell, what we've gone over here is we've gone through the different components that make up the infrastructure, the TGB, the RNI, the metrology, and the transmitter. Those are the 4 things that you're going to be using to make up your FlexNet system or your fixed base system. We talked about some of the advantages of having it. The one thing that really stands out is the privately owned spectrum, which you guys are primary users on. You guys don't need to carry the FCC license like you are now with the old R radios. We talked about the different advantages, the 2 watts of power, simply because it is on that private spectrum. That's what allows us to get 2 watts of power out of our radios. That's what makes your infrastructure, the amount of infrastructure very low, and obviously we're working on the coverage area being very big with lower dollars. Lastly, just the cost analysis. I mean, we can do that. Is there any questions?
Yeah, what's the cost?
For you today,
Out the door.
Generally, to put the TGB in with the installation, the antenna, the coax, you're probably looking at right around $35,000 for 1 TGB, which is one of those collectors at that water tower. Installed.
And now, just for comparison, then, so we won't have to do a lot with the water meters other than change our outside remote read.
You don't even have to change it. If you have the black pad on the outside of your house,
Okay.
you can simply add a radio to it and convert that right to AMI. A safe guess would be, if you looked at, and I could get this information by looking at your route files, but any meter number that you have on the water side that starts with a 5 or higher, you can pretty much convert those with no problems, right? Because those are 8-wheeled meters.
Okay.
You can pretty much convert those right to an AMI system or a FlexNet system.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're on a 10-year changeout or a 20-year changeout?
On water meters?
Yeah.
35.
Okay.
We're on once a lifetime.
All right.
Just kidding. Scratch that. Don't play that back.
Depending on water loss and how your meters are testing out and how aggressive you get with going into the new system, you can actually apply with the PSC to get to a 20-year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're...
Again, I apologize. I should have had this with me. But what's the cost of the electric meters? Now, all of those will have to be upgraded, correct?
Yes, they would be. I mean, to try to read backwards with a handheld on the old electric meters, the MXU4Es, we've run into problems with that in the past, so I would say that those would have to be replaced. You can use your investment on the water side, but on the electric meters, unfortunately, I would say that you want to move forward those. A residential 2S meter, $75.
Okay. And for the math, we're figuring probably about 3,500 electric meters in the system. So I've got, if we replace every single meter, we're at about 262,000, give or take. Okay.
I mean, you're going to have your different forms. You're going to have your 1Ss, and you might have some 2S 320s, some 4Ss. I mean, all that's it's going to affect the price a little bit, but not by much.
Yeah. Okay. And then, Phil, just so I'm clear, the licensing costs and all that, that's the same for either system?
With Census, it's $15,000 up front, licensing cost, and it's the same WPPI, $5,000 per year, so flat rate plus 50 cents per meter.
Per month? Or is that,
Per year,
Oh.
5,000 per year and 50 cents.
Okay.
Per meter per year.
all right, good.
And those costs are spreading WPPI staff and the licensing costs and software support costs over the learning program. So those are subject to change over time.
Yeah. Gotcha, right, okay, all right. What I will do is, as we progress in this discussion, is have a good side-by-side comparison, so you can, And again, I apologize for not having that. That should have been with you tonight. But we'll get that together, and we'll do the cost-benefit analysis, Tim, that you've been talking about. And,
Absolutely.
we'll make that the next part of the discussion, if that works for you guys.
There is a cost, though, associated with the water meters? It's just not a total replacement, is that correct?
Yeah, basically, what I'm saying for your water meters right now, because of the encoded technology that was brought in the 80s, you could probably go back further than what you have. But I would say, to be safe, any meter that you've installed in the last 10 years, you don't necessarily have to replace those water meters. You simply have to add the transmitter to it to make it an AMI system.
And how much is that?
Transmitters are roughly out of the book $120, but depending on how you guys want to attack this, we would get a special quote for that.
So the transmitter for a water meter costs more than the electric meter, which also includes a transmitter?
Very good point. And why is that? Because electric meters have their own source of power.
So that's an expensive battery you got in there.
That is an expensive battery. That's why we have a 20-year warranty on the actual radio.
Okay.
A very good point.
What would a new water meter with a transmitter be? Just curious.
No, the transmitter itself would be $120 for the water meter.
But if you put in a brand-new water meter,
Yeah, one of those nice iFlex or whatever.
iPearls with the
Yeah.
20-year accuracy, you're looking at $115. And there again, depending on the
115?
$115 for the 20-year meter, correct?
Okay.
But now, Tim, does that require its own transmitter then again? Or is
It
trans-
does.
Yeah.
Anything on the water requires a transmitter,
So it would be the 115 plus the transmitter
plus the
cost.
transmitter cost, correct? That's out of the book pricing that I'm giving you.
I understand, yeah. Is that, you following? Is that making sense?
The other thing that we would look at is how many of the radios that you actually have in your system, because you would get a discount as far as trading those radios in.
Oh,
Yes.
well, now we're talking. Now,
Which
remember,
normally, depending on whether it's a 505 or a 505C or a 510, it could range anywhere from $20 to $25.
Yeah. Just remember, those are only driven by a little old lady to church on Sunday, so they're in good shape.
I'll remember that.
Okay. Well, you and I can get some solid numbers together, looking at that specific information. Since we've got your meters now, we can get very specific about what we would need to replace, really. I mean, we can
Sure.
get pretty darn close. Okay.
Yep. Any other questions?
Anybody?
What would you like? Oh, boy, I apologize for this.
No, I also wanted to speak to some of the water meter stuff, because part of my group, I work for the group called National Services Group within HD Supply. So I'm regional. I cover Idaho through Michigan, but we have guys in our group that do a lot of project management. We also have a service that he can provide too when you're looking at your water meters, because you can do a lot of downsizing, and we do a lot of analytics on that with flow testing and testing some of the meters so that you can evaluate those. If you're going through this change-out program, I'm going to Chicago for some meetings tomorrow, but it's going to be a big part of what I have to say too, because there's so many of these things. When we look at these meters, you're looking at PD meters rather than the iPearl. Those are designed to run, according to AWWA, at half their rated capacity, right? So if you had a 120-gallon meter, steady flow, no more than 75 gallons, 60 to 75 gallons a minute on that. Well, all that's out the window with iPearls. So I like to say maybe the best 2-inch meter you can buy is a 1-inch iPearl. Just reduce the size down to really evaluate what you've got and some of that stuff. And we make that service available also.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it would be a way to kind of go through your system for a little bit, teach your guys what to look for. All the meters that we have, we didn't even deal with the Omni meter, but that big blue Omni meter and the iPearl, all of those have smart features in them, whether you hook a radio up or not. So once you install it, if you went back within 45 days with a laptop, pulled the data off of that meter on the water side of things, you're going to know if your downsizing was accurate or not. In our branch, in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, we have a pretty good-sized building, but inside that good-sized industrial building, we have a 2-inch water meter, and we have 3 bathrooms, a sink, and a drinking fountain. We don't need a 2-inch water meter that's in there. We never have needed a 2-inch water meter, and it's already over 30 years old, right? So that should be resized to no more than a 1-inch meter, and we'd just be fine with that. Fire protection's all separate and everything else, so there's no reason why we need to have that big of a meter, and it's time to go back now with some of these new technologies to reevaluate that. And that's a service that we do as part of our national services group. You'd have to deal with a guy from Arkansas, so you'd have to slow things down a little bit, but he's very good at what he does and developed that program for us. And I tend to roll it out a lot, get him up here a lot this summer to deal with things like that, because there's a big need for that, to go back and look at some of the sizing on that. It would really increase the revenue and take a look at a lot of places where you just don't, you have meters that were sized because that's what we did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That's interesting, yeah. I
Put that out
see
there
what
for
you're
you.
saying, yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much,
that.
Phil and everybody. Thank you.
Good, very good. Any further discussion on water and electric advanced metering systems, advanced metering infrastructure? It's got an S in here, not an I, on the agenda item.
Oh, yeah. We'll make sure our acronyms match up.
Okay, if not, we'll move on to item 6, recommendations for future agendas.
Well, I suspect one will be to get some cost comparisons together and some cost-benefit analysis, at least on these 2 systems, and then take a good hard look at how the dollars roll out. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, anything else?
Anything coming up that we need to be aware of?
Well, we're getting ready for the construction season, I guess. I think we've talked about some of the different streets that we'll be working on this summer. Cook, Brown,
Actually,
Madison, go ahead.
The fiber optic line for the new light and water building is going to, bids are coming in Thursday at 1. And at 2 o'clock on Thursday, we're doing the Cook Brown Court Circle Drive bids, so that'll be on the agenda. The task order for the remodeling Public Works building is on the agenda.
Sorry, couldn't hear it.
The task order for remodeling the Public Works building, that'll be on the council agenda next week. So that'll be a big issue that's moving forward. Paul's actually started cleaning out all the
Stuff.
the electric stuff and the water stuff. You hauled a bunch of copper out, did you?
We did. You'd be amazed what's there, but we hauled out almost $6,000 worth of copper that had it was the bus work from the substations that we dismantled so far. And that's probably the most valuable thing that's hanging around that place. But there's things there that have not been touched for, since the building was built. And so we're kind of doing some house cleaning and some salvaging.
So they're getting ready to start moving into the new building. Other than that, what'd you think of the data sheets that I provided?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about. So if you have any suggestions on how to modify them and what things to start looking for, I'm interested.
So if I have questions on that, should I talk to you, Steve, or you, Paul?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all on my computer. They're my analytics. So. Other than that.
All right. I guess we'll move on to item 7 and declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.